of here. Like Pastor went to go pick me up. He took me out to lunch earlier. I was good. I was good. And then he comes and I said, you know what, Pastor, I feel a little bit under the weather. I said, but you know what? It's a demon. I know it's a demon spirit because God's going to move tonight. God's going to do so. I started praying against that demon. I even called my daughter. I said, baby girl, check this out. This is what's going on right now. And she said, Daddy, it's a demon because God's been moving all week and this demon wants to take you down. The devil's a liar. And we need to understand that that demon is going to discourage you at times. It's going to discourage you from coming to church. It's going to start up some trouble at home. It doesn't matter what the situation may be. That demon spirit, you got to kick him in the behind. See, send us back to hell. Send into those pigs, into those swines. These demons were so nasty. So nasty. If you know what a pig's like, all right? I got a little ranch in Arizona. So I got some pigs, and you got to have some slop. It's kind of funny. You give them slop, and they eat all this nasty stinkios. And they need mud because they need to roll around the mud. If you don't know about pigs, if pigs don't have water and have mud, they die because they don't sweat. So they need to roll around the mud. So they're nasty and stinky already. You know what I mean? And then they're eating the mud, and you know what's in the mud. You know what I mean? So there's some junk up in there. But they didn't even like the demons. That they ran down, the herd ran down and threw themselves into a lake and just drowned. Now, how nasty are those demons? Yet many of us carry those demons around everywhere we go. Like if they're part of our family. You know what I'm saying? We need to cast out those demons. And tonight, before the service is over, we're going to pray. We're going to cast out some demons. Some of you guys have children here. Those curses need to be broken.
Come on.
They need to be set free. Because these demons come at a very young age. I'm here to tell you, man, God can do things in your life. Amen? God can restore you. See, my life started like this, okay? I grew up in a home where my parents, they had a little bit of money. My dad owned a restaurant and a nightclub kind of thing, and he worked for American Airlines. We're talking in the 70s. My mom had a good job, and they had this nightclub. I come from a pretty wealthy family. My grandfather's a pretty famous man right there in Arizona, Mexico, Sonora, kind of, they made movies of this guy. They made him some songs. Those are, Mexican brothers, Vicente Fernandez and Antonio Aguilar and all. Well, Antonio Aguilar made a movie of him, and he's came out on the Reader's Digest. I mean, this guy's got some, he got a little bit of money. So, he came out of a wealthy family. And so, but as time went by, my parents got more consumed into, staying at the nightclub and taking a sip here of alcohol and a sip there. And before you know it, all they were doing was staying at the bar and getting drunk. I grew up outside of a bar for most of my childhood, eating beef jerky and drinking Coke and eating cherries. You know what I mean? And so through the process of all that, my mother and my father would start getting babysitters to watch us. When I was 7 years old, my mother had a young girl take care of us, and this young girl molested me and my sister. Now, if you've been in that situation, you know what I'm talking about. You no longer think like a child because you've been violated. You think you've done wrong, my mother would start blaming me and telling me that it was my fault. Telling me that I was a bad son, that I was a bad child. At the age of 9 years old, I got molested again. I didn't think like a child. I didn't even know how to play baseball. I couldn't even ride a bike. I didn't have the mentality of a child. I thought I was a grown man. My mother would beat me, tell me that she hated me. My father would beat my mother because through that nightclub and everything, they ended up losing everything. We ended up moving into the projects. I was very young. We used to live in Compton, and then from Compton we moved into the projects, and now we're in the projects. And I never knew what that kind of lifestyle, gang lifestyle, anything like that. My mother would start having affairs with different men. I see my father grab my mother and throw her from the top of the stairs all the way down. I remember running out of my room and seeing my mother laying at the bottom of the stairs, all broken up into pieces. I see my mother get into a fight with my father, and my mother went into the restroom and shut the door, and my mom pulled out a gun and shot my dad in the hand. I would see all these things as a child. My mind was getting messed up. How many of you understand that what happens to you as a child, you take it to your adulthood? You start to get bitter. You start to get angry inside. It messes you up mentally. My mom wasn't there. I remember being a little boy and being abused, and I would call out for my mother, and my mother was never there. I remember calling out for my father, and my father was never there. As I grew up, I started drinking at the age of 11 years old. I would go into the refrigerator, and I'd open up the refrigerator, and there'd be nothing to eat, so I'd grab a beer. My mom, it didn't matter to my mom, because as long as we weren't doing drugs, she thought it was all right. I'd grab a beer, and I'd have my friends over, and we'd start drinking and partying, and doing our little thing, and she really didn't matter to her. I remember at a very young age, I got together with this girl. I was 12 years old. She wasn't a girl. She was a dispatcher for the police department. I was 12 years old. I wanted somebody to love me. My mother had never told me that she loved me. Not once. I wanted somebody to tell me, somebody to hold me, and tell me that they loved me. I got together with this girl by the age of 12 years old. I had to leave LA and went to Douglas, Arizona, which is a little town. And I would have to go to Rodeo, New Mexico, and go pick chili and watermelon at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was 12 years old. 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd get up and I'd wait by a light pole as the bus would go by the border and pick up all the guys, all the illegals that would jump over, and they picked them up. It wasn't as bad as it is now, and then they would drive up. They would pick me up on the way out, and I'd go work. It was already getting dark when I'd be coming back. I remember for 3 months, I don't eat potatoes because I was telling Pastor, I ate potatoes for 3 months. That was my dinner for 3 months, potatoes. I'm not too crazy about watermelon because watermelon was my breakfast for 3 months. In the morning, I would get there, I'd break a watermelon, I'd get the center of the watermelon, and that's what I would eat. That was my breakfast. Dinner was going back home and going to this restaurant and getting a bunch of fries and eating French fries. On the weekend, I would go hunt rabbits and hunt quails, and that's what I would eat. I learned how to barbecue rabbits and quails, and I learned how to hook them up in different ways, you know what I mean? But I remember being out there working, and I was 12, 13 years old, and I remember crying. And I remember calling out for my mother. I remember calling out saying, "Mommy, where are you?" A child at that age, they need their mother. They need their mother. I couldn't see it at the time, and you can't see it at the time, because when you're out there running around, you don't see that kind of stuff. You think you're a man already, and you feel that you got to put up this appearances, and so I didn't see it. Now I look at my kids, man, I look at my grandkids, I'm like, man, I was little. I was just a little guy. At the age of 15 years old, I had been gone for a while, and my mother's dad lived right across the border. Her dad had died. I called my mother and I told her, "Mom, your dad died." And she goes, "Who is this?" I go, "This is your son." She goes, "You're not my son." She goes, "Who are you?" I said, "This is your son, Frankie." I said, "Your father died." So she comes back and she makes me all these promises. She comes to her father's funeral. And she makes me all these promises that everything would be better, that we'd have a better life. As she comes and picks me up, she takes me back to California. As I get back to LA, man, it just got worse. She had different men coming into the house. Now I'm not thinking the same anymore. I'm a little bit bigger now. I'm a little bit grown up now. You know what I mean? You know, us Mexicans, you know, we don't grow that tall. You know, we just kind of stay. you know, so this is tall. you know, and so you gotta understand. I was a little guy. So I get back, and my mom has these different guys at the house, and I remember walking in one day, and she's there with her boyfriend, and as soon as I walk in, my mom, I smoked a lot of Sherm back then, and for those of you that don't know what Sherm is, it's embalming fluid, is basically what it is. And so I just smoked a Sherm steak. I walked into the house, and as soon as I walked into the house, my mom says something to me. I didn't say buenas noches, which is, good night or good evening or however you want to put it. And my mom's boyfriend said, "Oh, leave him alone. He's just a stupid idiot." That's what he said it in Spanish. And I remember being in the kitchen making me something to eat, and I ran from the kitchen with the knife in my hand, and I jumped over the sofa to stab him in his heart. And because that was my mentality. And when I jumped over to go stab him, one of my friends grabbed me and he goes, "No, Frank, not like this. Because we'll do it another time." And I remember, after that, my mom had no respect for me. She didn't care. I remember seeing things that I should have never seen. Loved me. I knew she didn't love me. As time went by, she got together with this other guy, and as she got together with this other guy, I got more involved in gangs and all this kind of lifestyle. And my mom got this boyfriend. His name was Angel, which eventually ended up being my stepdad. And my sister called me one day because my homeboy had gotten out of prison, and he was always looking for a reason to fight my stepdad. He didn't like my stepdad. He was a big old cowboy, with big old arms, all tatted down. And my homeboy had gotten out of prison, and he was pretty big guy, and he's always looking for a reason to fight him. And he would tell me, "Hey, Frank, does he treat you bad? Does he treat you bad? Hey, all you got to do is tell me, man. If he treats you bad, I'll get him. I'll get him. All you got to do is tell me, man. I'll get him." I thought, "Nah, man, he's a good guy." He showed me, the way I seen it, he showed me some love. He was the only one that I seen that ever cared for me. He showed me how to use a weapon. He showed me how to use a knife. And he was the only one that was always on my side when he knew that when I would get into a fight with somebody, he'd stand by my side and he'd watch me. So you know what I'm saying? All that made me feel loved. It made me feel like somebody cared about me. Well, the day before all this other stuff happened, my stepfather was at a gas station across the street, and he's putting gas in his car. And as he's putting gas in his car, my homeboy comes up to him and says, "Hey!" And when he looks up, my homeboy hits him, knocks him out, takes his cowboy hat away. As he takes his cowboy hat away, he walks away. And I come home that night, and when I come home that night, my stepdad's at the house standing at the front door. And I remember he's drinking a bottle of whiskey. And he says, "Where's your homeboy at?" I said, "I don't know." He goes, "Well, if you see him, tell him to come on down." He goes, I bought him a brand new hat. And he puts it on. He goes, "And I also have something else for him." And he pulls out a gun. He goes, "Tell him to come on over." I said, "Nah, man, I'm not going to do that." I said, "Why don't you just fight him one-on-one?" He goes, "I already tried that and it didn't work." So they live right next, you got to understand, they live right next door to us. So, the projects over there, they have they call it a flat top, which is it's only one story, and the other ones are, 2-story buildings. And so he lived right next door to us, and so my stepdad did is he put the stereo right next to their wall. He turned it up full blast. And as he turned it up full blast, my homeboy, I ended up going upstairs, and my homeboy ended up coming and knocking at the door. My stepdad opened the door, and when he opened the door, he was standing in front of the door with, he had a sarape over him. My sister starts yelling, and she calls me. She says, "Frank, you need to hurry up and get down here." She goes, they're arguing, and you need to stop them." I end up running down the stairs, and as I run down the stairs, I go stop them, and as I'm getting ready to stop them, I see my homeboy throw the sarape up in the air. You need to understand that this guy doesn't have a shirt on. He throws the sarape up in the air. He picks up a sawed-off, and as he picks up the sawed-off, my stepdad is pulling out the gun, and he's getting ready to set it on the table. And as he sees him throw it up, he grabs the gun and he starts to unload. Boom, boom. And I'm telling you, it looks like a movie. You know what I mean? If you've been in a situation like that, it seems like it's not even happening. He's turning around with the rifle still in his hand. He's going around in circles. I could see the bullets going in and out of his chest. As the bullets are going in and out of his chest, and I mean, he unloaded the whole gun, shot him 9 times in the chest. Every single shot hit him in the chest. And my homeboy falls to the ground, and as he falls to the ground, everything's like quiet. It just doesn't seem real. I remember grabbing the car keys to the car, and I threw them on my stepdad, and I said, "You need to get out of here, man, because if you don't, my homeboys are going to kill you." He grabs the rifle and pulls it off of my homeboy's hand, and he takes the bullet that got jammed, because that's what happened. My homeboy had beat him to it, but the bullet got jammed. He pulls out the bullet that got jammed, and he puts it to his face, and he says, "Do you want more? I'll give you more." As I'm there with him, my stepfather takes off, and I'm holding him in my arms, and I'm calling my dad, and I'm saying, "Dad, you need to come down here." I go, "Angel just killed George." At that moment and at that time, his mom comes out, and she's yelling now. This man is 32 years old. I'm 17 at the time. My homeboy's 32 years old, but his mom is behind me, and she's yelling, "My baby! My baby! What did they do to my baby? What did they do to my baby?" And this lady had taken care of us since we were little. And she's standing behind me, and she's yelling out for her baby. And as he dies in my arms, the cops get there, and of course, right away they get there. I'm the first one they get. They slam me down, they cuff me, they put me in the car and take me in. As they take me in, I'm inside the jail, and they're questioning me, asking me all kinds of questions. I told them that I didn't know what had happened. As they brought me back, they said, "Word's out that you're dead, man, as soon as you get back." So I get back, and as soon as I get back, what had happened was that my mom was out at the bar drinking. And it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. She showed up to the house, and there's this body laying in front of the house. And it's covered. And 2 weeks prior to that, they had tried to kill me, so she thought it was me. So she gets off the car, and she starts yelling out my name. "Frankie, Frankie!" So my homeboys right away automatically think that I have something to do with this murder. So as I come back, they leave me there, they drop me off. They have taken my mom in, they drop me off, and as they drop me off, they basically threw me off the cop car. They throw me off the cop car, and so I start walking through the crowd, and I remember my homeboys calling me out. And I'm telling you, there's probably anywhere from 150 to 200 gang members. I lived on Pacific Coast Highway in Vermont, which is a very big highway out there. The whole highway was closed off. All of Vermont was closed off. I mean, there was cars all over the streets. Had the whole thing closed off. I lived right in the main street. And I remember my homeboys calling me, and they said, "Come on, man, let's go get your stepdad." But I already knew what the game was. I'd already been there. I've done it, I said, "No, I'm not going to go. You guys go. I'll tell you where he's at. You can go get him." Because they knew it was him. As they were telling me, "Come on, let's go. One of them said, "You know what? You don't have to go nowhere with us. Let's do it here." I remember my homeboy opening up his jacket and pulling out a gun, and I remember I just ran through the crowd. You know what I mean? I'm like, poof, I was gone through the crowd. And I'm trying to get away, and as I'm running, I remember telling my uncles were there with my aunts and everything. I'm like, cover my back. And I remember one of my uncles telling me, he says, "This is what you wanted, this is what you get." That's how my family was. See, but when they needed something from me, I would always be there for them, because that's our mentality when we're out in the world. We think that we have to be there for everybody. And so through all this stuff that's going on in my life, man, you don't understand, I'm starting to get bitter. I'm starting to get hateful. I was like that man, that demon-possessed man. Things started happening in my life that shouldn't happen. I no longer thought like a little boy. I no longer, I didn't know what it was like I said, what it was like to play ball. I didn't know what it was like to hug my mother, love my mother. I didn't know all these things. I ended up in Arizona, August 4th of 1983. Some of you guys probably weren't even born. You know what I mean? I ended up in Tucson, Arizona. Going through Tucson, and I'm telling you, the only time I ever heard anything about Tucson was in the John Wayne movies, you know what I mean? You know, it's just Western movies. I didn't know nothing about no Tucson, Arizona. I get to Tucson, Arizona, and I end up getting married. I got there in August, and by February, I'm married. Because I can't be by myself. I don't know what it's like to be by myself. I end up marrying this Filipino girl. Filipino girl, I was, we were into drug dealing, but not really drug dealing. But since now we're in Arizona, the border's 45 minutes away. You want to talk about drug dealing? That's where it was at the time. I started selling drugs, I started selling weed. Before you know it, I used to have 600 pounds of weed just for personal use. That was my personal use. I used to walk out of my house with bricks of cocaine. I mean, bricks. I'd wrap them up in a towel. I walk outside. It's hot up there, so they thought I was breaking a block of ice. I'd be out there breaking a big old block of cocaine right in the middle of the street. The cops would be watching me from across. I'd be smoking a joint. They'd be coming. Back then, there was no legal medical marijuana, nothing like that. You know what I mean? I'd be smoking a joint. They'd come straight at me. By the time they would get to where I was at, I'd swallow it. I'd swallow it and tell them, what are you going to do? Can't do nothing to me. I've done nothing. You ain't got no proof. So I started selling dope, and as I'm selling dope, me and my wife, she's selling dope, she's getting high, she's doing the same thing. And so we end up having our first daughter. She cheats on me. I had seen my mother cheat on my dad all his life. All my life. Now I get married, and this woman cheats on me. I said, man, all women are the same. I'm going to tell you where I learned that from. My mother. My mother would always tell me, you never trust a woman that cries. She's a liar. You never trust a woman. Do you understand that? You would think that my father would be imparting in these things into me, but it was my mother that was teaching me these things. So from there on, I didn't trust her. That was the first time I've ever touched a woman. I'm telling you, I'm not proud of it, but I turned into a very abusive man. Had no respect for women. No respect for women. Didn't understand that they're a gift from God. Now I understand that. Didn't understand that back then. You're lost, you're messed up, you're in the world. You don't know all these things. As time went by, I ended up going back with her. We ended up having, every time I was going to leave her, she'd come up pregnant. Every time she'd come out pregnant. So finally, I was like, you know what? I'm done. Call me when the next baby, we were on our fourth kid already. I was like, you know what? When you're ready to have the baby, you call me, I'll be there. I remember coming back when my daughter was going to be born, and when I came back, a little bit after that, I get a call. I'm at work. And as I'm working, I see a police officer show up to my workplace, and he calls me. He says, Mr. Romero? I said, yes, sir. He says, can I talk to you? I said, of course. So I go up to him and see what he's got to say. And he says, is your mother Aida Romero? I said, yes. She's been shot with a 12-gauge shotgun in her face. You need to understand that was the only, I had no relationship with my mother. I just wanted my mother to tell me that she loved me one time. That's all I wanted. I wanted her to say that she loved me one time. I had lost all hope. All hope. Because I have lost my mother now, and there was no way I was going to get her back. They ended up taking me to California. I ended up going to go identify her body. I was just sharing with Pastor right now. She was at a distance, and I could see the whole side of her face gone. I remember looking at her, and I said, okay, that's enough. I went back to her house. They clean up, but they don't really clean up. I went back and I started to clean her house, and as I started to clean her house, I remember I hated myself because I'm cleaning one of her mattresses, and she had some stuff for my kids and my brother's baby and stuff, and as I'm cleaning the stuff, I remember I got a knot right in my throat because I couldn't cry. And I'm there and I'm cleaning this stuff off. never going to see her again. I remember going and taking her to they took her to the morgue. I had a flyer from California into Tucson, and I remember as we had the funeral, I remember being at the funeral, and I was telling Pastor, my mom was in the coffin, and I'm leaning over, and I'm just crying because there's no hope. I'm never going to see her again. You know what I mean? She's never going to tell me she loved me. She was 46 years old. My mom was young, beautiful lady. She was young, and I remember crying over her coffin, and I remember someone touching my shoulder. I remember it was a lady, and she touches my shoulder, and she says, "It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." And I remember hearing that voice, and I remember looking down, and I seen this woman's feet. But as I took, wiped the tears off my eyes, I turned around, and there was nobody there. And from there on, believe me, I lost it. I started drinking. I drank for 3 months straight. Just drank, got high, drank, got high. One day I was at my sister's house, and we were drinking. I got into a little argument. Kind of down talked me, you know what I mean? Like if I was nothing, like if I was a nobody. And his problem was that he hated the guys that were around me because he hated that they had respect for me. And if you've been around and when you're out in the streets and you get a little title, I tell everybody I was like the Jack in the Box guy, you know what I mean? I had a big old head like this, but it was just full of hot air. You know what I'm saying? I walked around and I thought I had it under control. I thought whatever I said went. And so my brother-in-law starts telling me stuff, and we start getting into an argument. And as we start to get into an argument, I told him I didn't want to hear it, and I started to walk away. I'm still dealing with all the murder of my mother, all this stuff that had happened in my life. And I started to walk away from him, and as I started to walk away from him, he runs behind me and he tackles me down and he knocks me down. And as he knocks me down, I hit the floor and I get knocked out. They take me to the house, and I end up being inside the house. I guess when I woke up, I looked at my face, and my face was all bashed in on one side, and I said, is this what? I said, okay, so let's go back to his house. I got this friend of mine, he's like a brother to me. His name's Willie Rose. He's from Texas. He's from Houston, and he's real close to me. And I said, come on, Willie, let's go. And so we go down there, we get to my sister's house, and I get to my dad's, I knock at his door, nobody comes out. I walk around and I go to the other side, and when I go to the other side, my brother-in-law, my brother-in-law, my dad, my sister, and my dad's wife come out. And when they come out, Willie's standing in front of them, and I remember he threw a bottle at my homeboy Willie, and I grabbed him from his throat, and I started to stab him in the throat. I stabbed him 8 times in the throat. And he takes off running, and as he takes off running, he falls to the floor, and as he falls to the floor, I tell my homeboy, kill him! Kill him! And when he pulls out the gun and puts it to him, my sister gets in front and says, Frank, that's the father of my kids. But he's going to die anyways. Let him go. So we take off, we go home. House got surrounded by the cops. I get taken in. The next day I got up, I didn't even know what I had done. I called my sister to get me out of jail. And she's like, you don't remember what you did? I said, no, I don't. She goes, you the throat. Oh, I'm back home trying to make things right. But, you're lost. You're completely lost. You don't know what to do. You don't know how to act. My life, all these things that had happened in my life, my parents going through a divorce, I was going through head games. I didn't know how to cope with all this stuff. If you've ever been in a situation like that, you think about suicide, you think about just, you ending your life because there's nothing better. You figure, you know what, there's no hope for me whatsoever. My mother would say that I was a loser. My father would say I was a loser. My grandmother would say I was a loser. I'll share with Pastor today. One time I got on top of the roof of the house. I grabbed the rope and I threw it on top of this tree and I tied it. I put it around my neck and I jumped off the roof to hang myself. And I brought the tree down. It was no little tree. But I knew that I was demon possessed. I used to sit in my room in the middle of the night. And my wife would be asleep. And I would plan out how to kill her. She had never done anything to me. Nothing. Nothing whatsoever. I remember looking to the sides of the wall and I would see this big old shadow of this demon on the wall. And I would start to talk to it. In the middle of the night, tell me, what are you doing? Time going by and my wife wakes up one day at 2 o'clock in the morning and she says, Frank, I said, what's going on? The demons start to take over our lives, like this man. Can you imagine? This man never thought that he would be in a cemetery running around butt naked, lost, completely lost. See, you never thought that you would be doing the things you've done, ending up in prison for hurting someone, selling dope, whatever the case may be. You never thought that you would hit your spouse or abuse your children. Maybe you've never even abused your children, but you've abused them emotionally. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? All these things, these are demons that fall upon these spirits, fall upon these children and destroy them. Children no longer think like little kids. If you've been here and you've been molested as a child, you know what I'm talking about. And messed up your life and made you angry and bitter and hateful. If your mother never told you that she loved you, how would you even know what true love is? Aren't they the ones that are supposed to take care of you and tell you that they love you? Aren't they the ones that are supposed to protect you? But see, we call lust love, right? See, that's why we have so many young ladies out there sleeping with this guy and that guy and that guy. You know why? Because they're looking for love. But in the process of doing all this, you're getting demon possessed. Believe me. Because when you lay with someone, them demons that person brings fall upon you. Wow. I heard someone say this a long time ago. If you're the temple of God, right, and you're created in God's image, and you go lay with a man that maybe already slept, even if he slept with one person, let's say, and then you sleep with another one, and then you sleep with another one, and those demons fall upon you, and those demons fall upon you. Can you imagine what you're doing with the temple of God? You're basically prostituting Jesus. You're giving them, you're just selling them out for nothing. Because we believe that lust is love. Believe me, that man that sleeps with you, that man that holds you, if he ain't a man of God, he really don't love you. Because he don't even love himself. Come on, man, you know what I'm talking about. And you know the same thing. Because you're looking for someone to love you. You're looking for a woman that'll care for you and hold you. Your wife isn't your mama. Remember that. Your wife is your wife. But don't be looking for some chick to sleep with because she ain't going to just love you just because. You need to fall in love with Jesus. You need to put that guard up by the blood of Christ. I'm not talking about putting a wall up around you and not letting no one love you. Because that's what happened to me. I couldn't love anyone because nobody had loved me. I didn't like anybody touching me because I had been molested. Even when I came into the church, I remember brothers coming up to me and wanting to hug me. I tell them, don't touch me. I remember a man coming up to me and lay hands on me to pray for me. I said, man, are you married, bro? Don't touch your wife, don't touch me. Because in my mind, I thought I was being violated. See, no longer could I think like a child. I'd been abused all my life. At the age of 7 years old, I had been abused. At the age of 9, I had been abused. I didn't think like a child anymore. I thought like a grown person. I couldn't do the things a grown person did, but I was already thinking completely different. You can't think like a child. Can you imagine what this man went through? Running around, being shackled up, tied up. It says that he would break the chains. Can you imagine? Back then, I guarantee you, them chains were some chains. You know what I mean? Now you get metal, man. You lean up against a car, you did it. You know what I'm talking about? You know? Man, metal was metal back then. You know what I'm saying? But this man broke these chains. It says he broke the chains and shackles. That means his legs were chained up, his hands were chained up, and he would break them because he was demon possessed. You know the word legion means more than 2,000. That means this man had more than 2,000 demons upon him. How many demons are up in here right now? We got to cast them out. The devil ain't got no place in this church. See, we were created in God's image. I don't want nobody to be hurt anymore. I was hurt since I was a little boy. You carry these things around you into your adulthood. How many times I would sit in my living room with a gun, putting it to my head, trying to kill myself because I knew that I couldn't be a good father. Because I knew I couldn't be a good husband. I'm not proud of the things I've done. I would beat my poor wife for nothing. All she had to do was disagree with me. Because that's who I was. That's who I was created to be. I was demon possessed. I was that man that was demon possessed. I was telling Pastor, my wife tells my kids now, says when your dad used to get mad, he'd freak people out and he'd run straight up a wall and he'd flip around in the air. If I do that now, man, I don't, I've fallen and I can't get up. You know what I mean? That's demon possessed. That's demon possessed. Throwing myself off that roof to hang myself. That's demon possessed. I hung myself in my kitchen one time. Everybody was asleep. I was telling Pastor. I stood there like, and I wouldn't die. I took myself off the rope. You understand what I'm saying? But I was tired of myself. I wanted to be a good husband, but I didn't know how. I wanted to be a good father, but I didn't know how. I knew that I was hurting my kids because I wasn't being an example. I wanted to love my wife. My wife, she was like the most beautiful person in the world. Day one, when I met my wife, I remember seeing my wife from a distance. Beautiful smile. She's got lips about this big. She has some little tiny lips. She's always smiling, She got these big old eyes. She has beautiful big brown eyes. And so, man, I would see her and she'd laugh or anything, and giggle. I said, man, I want what she has. I want what she has. You know that you'll bring misery to somebody's life before you bring. I made her miserable. I took all that joy, all that happiness that she had, I've taken it all away from her. I made her miserable. It got to the point where she just wished I would die. In 1995, I committed suicide because I was tired of myself. I remember my kids, all my kids, man, they love me to death, but I was verbally abusive to them. My wife, I was physically abusive to her, and emotionally, whatever, all of the above. I wanted to be a good father. I didn't want to be a father like my father. How many of you guys ever said that? I don't want to be like my dad, but yet we end up being just like him. Or I don't want to be like my mom. We end up being just like them. You know why? Because they're demons. And we have to break those curses, those strongholds. The Bible says that it falls generation upon generation upon generation until we put a stop to it. It's our job to put a stop to it. It's by the blood of Jesus Christ that we are set free. Amen. In 1995, I remember being home, and I told my wife, I'd gone to the bathroom. I took 150 Prozacs. I remember it was a big old jar. I remember grabbing the whole thing, and about 2-3 handfuls, and I remember downing them. I went into the bathroom, and I downed them. I took them all, and I said, It said that 5 of them, I'd already read up on them and everything, said 5 of them should kill me, but I said, man, I'm going to make sure 150 times. You know what I mean? So I took 150 of them. I gave my kids a kiss. I remember kissing all my kids and telling them that I loved them. I remember going and laying down on the bed and putting my head on my wife's lap and telling her, just rub my head, baby. Everything's going to be okay from now on. Because I thought that if I got rid of me, I got rid of the problem. The thing is that you can get rid of you, but the curses are still there. The demons are still lingering. You taking your life away is being a coward's way out. Because you leave all those demons with your family. Because you're already in hell. You can't do that, man. You can't do that to your family. If you're a real man of God, a real woman of God, and if you're not, you'll have a chance tonight. You got to break those curses. My wife says that in 20 minutes, I was like a dog outside on my knees, dragging myself, foaming at the mouth. Her and the neighbors picked me up, put me in a van. She took me to the hospital. I remember being at the hospital. I remember her taking me to the hospital. I remember everything was like a blur. And I remember, her running back and forth. She's running back and forth. I could see her screaming and yelling and crying, but I couldn't hear her. I remember those chairs, the rows of chairs, and those people sitting down, and I'm sitting at the end, and then there's all these people sitting there. And as I'm sitting there, I kind of remember just being there. I'm playing with this little girl. This little girl's running around, and I'm playing with her. And I remember my wife telling me, come on, Frank, it's sure, you got to get up. The doctors are coming. Come on, get up. And I could see the doctors from the double door, and the doctors are running, and they got this stretcher. Obviously, they can see something I can't see. The devil's right there. He's waiting for me. And so I see these doctors running. I said, babe, but all these people. And she goes, what people? I turn around. I look. There's nobody there. It's like it was my turn, man. You're going to hell, buddy. I said, babe, but the little girl. And she goes, what little girl? And as soon as I stood up, them double doors opened up. And when them double doors opened up, my heart stopped. My heart stopped. She said, I collapsed. She said, they put me on the stretcher. They took me in. She said, they started to pump out my stomach. They throw like charcoal down you and start pumping out your stomach. She said, they started to shock me. My heart would beat a couple of times and it would stop again. Then they would give me, a couple more times and then I would stop again. She said, they kept on working and working and working until finally the doctor says, he's done. He's done. Can you imagine? I don't remember none of what she says. She says, they were done. A nurse walks in and she says, look, this man got some babies. They're dead. Now, who this woman was, I don't even know. She could have been an angel for all we know. Just, this man got some babies. You got to try one more time. My wife said that the doctor got some adrenaline and gave me a shot of adrenaline, shocked me, and I grabbed him. She said it took 8 doctors and nurses to hold me down and tie me down. I had gone into a slight coma. They thought I was going to die. They thought I was going to make it. They said that when I was out, they had just given up on me. They said, you know what? They had me in ICU. It's a dark place. I remember it was pitch dark underneath me, pitch dark above me, on the side, all around. But I was lit up. I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand. I remember looking at myself. I could look at myself down. I could see myself. I could see myself in this dark area, and I would look around like, man, where is this place? And suddenly, boom, I wake up. When I wake up, they have me tied down. I mean, they got my forehead tied down, my chin tied down, my chest, my arm. I'm tied down every 6 inches. Ain't no lie. I'm laying about right here. IV's like over there. And I was telling Pastor today, one of the nurses walked in to my wife. As soon as she heard me move, she gets up, she starts crying. Oh, he's awake, he's awake. Like if I was the greatest thing in the world, you know what I mean? I really believe in my heart that she was there because she wanted to see me die. Because my wife was faithful. That's one thing about her, man. She's always been faithful. And she wouldn't believe that unless she would have seen me die herself. She got up, she started screaming, the nurse gets in there, and I remember calling the nurse with my finger. I remember how I could move with my finger. I said, come here. And she said, hell no. That's what she told me. I was the word. I never forget. She said, hell no, I ain't getting close to you. You're crazy. That's what she told me. She goes, you're crazy. Remember, God holds you responsible. The same way God holds man responsible, God holds the woman responsible for that man. My wife stayed there with me. She could have said, you know what? Ni modo. Oh, he died. Oh, all right, later. But she didn't. She said, nope. When I got out of the hospital, I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. 2 weeks I lasted in the hospital. When I came out, because of the drugs, I came out with the walker, and I came out with an oxygen tank. I mean, I had I was like 20-some years old. Barely moving. You know what I'm saying? And every day, she was faithful. I remember my brother-in-law walked in, the one that I stabbed in the throat. He walks in and he goes, you're going to be like that for the rest of your life, bro. And my wife says, no, he's not. Every day. Before you knew it, got rid of the walker. Later on, got rid of the oxygen. But guess what? Nothing changed. Nothing changed. I was still the same person. Because see, I might have wanted to change, but that don't mean nothing. It's only the blood of Jesus Christ that can set you free. Wow. See, I started going to these programs. They wanted to send me to these suicide places. You know, all these places. That doesn't help. That doesn't help because it doesn't set you free. It's like, being a heroin addict. They put you on these other, what do they got now? They got some little strips they give you now, don't they? Something like that. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're going from one drug to another. That's not going to help you. From a bottle of tequila to, a big pint of tequila to a little pint, a half pint. It's not going to work. It just doesn't work that way. I'm going to give you, I remember guys coming up to me with coins. Look, bro, I did 30 days. It's like, what are you going to do with that coin, bro? You know what I mean? See, that doesn't change your life. It's only Jesus Christ that changes your life. I tried all these programs. I tried counseling. I tried marriage counseling. Didn't do nothing but mess up my marriage. See, because every time they would tell me something, I just rebelled. And when they said something to my wife, she would rebel. Because we didn't want to hear it. As time went by, we're trying to fix things, man. It wasn't working out. We're getting ready for a divorce. I'm still abusive. I'm still full of hate. I'm still full of bitterness. My wife's got Mormons coming to the house. She makes fun of me now because she goes, can you imagine if you would have got baptized in the Mormon church? You'd be Elder Frank. You'd have a little tag of attention. You know what I mean? She had Mormons coming. She had Jehovah's Witnesses. Her uncle and her aunt were somebody in the Catholic Church. She had them coming. So all this stuff, I'm like, man, this isn't for me. All these Bible thumpers, all this stuff, it's not for me. But I remember being at home and being broken. And I wanted to be a good husband. You know what I'm talking about. You want to be a good person, don't you? You want to love people. You want to be loved back. I didn't want people to be afraid of me anymore. I wanted people to say hello. I wanted my wife to tell me she loved me. I wanted her to be with me because she wanted to be with me. Not forcing them to be with you. Hunting them down like dogs. I'm telling you, you know what I'm talking about. Or being hunted like a dog. Either way. I really wanted to know what true love was because I had never seen it in my home. I had never seen my father love my mother. I had never seen my mother love I'm telling you, my mom, if I walked up to my mom and tried to hug her, she would push me back and say, get away from me. Get away from me. And palagoso, she would tell me. That means like, I think like sweet, like caramel. And she'd tell me in Spanish, get away from me. Can you imagine that as a child? Wanting to hug your mother and she tells you these things and she pushes you away? I mean, how are you going to feel love? How are you even going to understand what true love is? I wanted to be loved. I remember being home. My wife invited me to go see a drama. We went, and I didn't want to see no dramas. I'd already grown up around Victory Outreach in LA. You see Victory Outreach everywhere. All these guys are all gang members, and I had seen everything. To me, it was all just a front. And I'm not putting anybody down. I'm just telling you what I see. I'd walk in, I'd see these guys walking around, bandanas on their head, their dickies all the way up to here, flannels down to here, with the Bible, and smoking a cigarette. You see them in the corners hanging out, smoking a joint. Young girls would be passing by, hey baby, what's all that about? That's not, to me, that wasn't a real Christian. To me, that wasn't a real man of God. So I didn't really believe all this stuff. I said, all that Bible thumping stuff is a lie. That's all a lie. So as I would see all these things, it just didn't matter to me. So I end up going to this drama with her, and as we're there at this drama, she goes and she's checking it out with the kids, and I don't know if they got saved or not, really didn't care at that time. I'm standing by my truck, and my little minivan, all graphic down, slammed to the ground, some true smoke, what I mean? I was back in the day, I had to have a van, but I wanted to look cool, and so, I'm there smoking a cigarette. I remember this guy, he's a pastor actually in Brazil now. He was in San Diego, now he's in Brazil. And he comes up to me and goes, hey man, let me tell you about Jesus Christ. I said, bro, you know what? You and your Jesus Christ can step away from me, bro, because I'm going to knock your teeth out. I don't want nothing about your Jesus. And he's right, man, it's cool. I remember standing there, this other man comes up to me and starts telling me, hey man, what kind of work you do? He comes through a different way, and we start talking about work. And right before I left, he goes, hey, can I pray for you, bro? I said, you want me to pray? I get all defensive, You want me to pray? He's like, no, man, let me pray for you. So knock yourself out. So he prays for me. Before you know it, he's at my house visiting me. I don't know how he found out where I live. But he found out. And he'd show up. This man worked in Phoenix. You need to understand, Phoenix is about 100 miles away from Tucson. And every other day, he would pass by my house because I live by the freeway, and he would stop and say, hey man, how you doing? I'm doing good. How's work? Good. Before he would leave, he'd go, hey man, can I pray for you? Go for it, man. Go for it. Knock yourself. A couple of times, I'd walk outside. He's one of the pastors. He's actually the pastor of Mexico City. He's an evangelist now from our church. And he was just preaching not too long ago. I'd walk up to him, and he'd walk up and start telling me, and I'd light me a big old fat joint, and I'd grab a beer, and I'd blow the smoke in his face. He wouldn't walk away, he'd just move to the side, He'd get a little high, I don't know, what I mean? I was my blood. I said, man, I'm going to get rid of this guy somehow, some way. And man, I'd like to invite you out to my house, bro, for a cookout. Little carne asada, as Mexicans, we don't say no to free food, So I said, all right, let me ask my wife, and then, but there's a catch. There's always a catch. I said, but first, bro, we got to go to church. I was like, man, I knew it wasn't free. So I go, I don't know, man, let me ask my wife, bro, because she's a Catholic. She might not want to go to your church. And I turn around like, hey, babe, you want to go to their church? And she's like, yeah, let's go. Religion, don't you know? They'll kick you out, because she's German while I'm Mexican, so it's kind of like, And so we end up going. We go to church, and as we're going to church, we're going for a couple of times. I remember sitting down so for some, when you come as a visitor, they always sit you like right here in the third, first 2-3 rows, and that's where they had me. And I got, I got some earrings. I think I told you guys last time I had a goatee coming down. Yeah, I showed a picture. I got a picture of the pastor. I got a big old push broom coming down. I had a ponytail all the way down to here. I had these big old loops coming down. I had a bandana on my head. I had a big old jersey down to here, dickies and everything. I thought I looked good though. I thought everybody else looked messed up. It was just me that looked good. And so I'm standing there. So everybody just reach over towards me. And I'd turn around. What the heck are these people doing? Why they want to touch me? And so what they were praying for me. So I told my wife, you know what? You want to keep on coming to this church, we'll come, but I'm not going to sit. I'd start cussing everybody out, And she'd be like, no, Frank, don't do that. I'm blessing them. No, I'm just kidding. And so finally, she would come, she'd sit down, and I'd go stand on the side of the wall. Kick back, put my foot up, I'd smoke a joint before I walked in every single time. And so I'm there, I get there one day, and I walk inside the church, and I just smoked a big old blunt outside, and I get in, and I'm kicking back against the wall. And the night before, I had challenged God. And I had called out on God, and I said, what have you done for me? Where were you, little boy? Where were you when I got molested? Where were you when I got beaten? Where were you when my mother got murdered? Where were you? Because I never seen you. Show me if you're real, because I've never That night when I go into service, I'm standing against that wall, and this man is preaching. He had just came from London, and he's preaching the Word of God. And as he's preaching the Word of God, he turned around and looked at me. And I'm like, what's it looking at? You know? And then so I'm standing in that corner, because I know he's checking me out, you know, and I'm stoned. You know, when you're stoned, you get stoned because you don't want to pay attention, but you pay more attention. You know, if you got stoned before, you know what I'm talking about here. You know what I mean? You got that face, right? And so, and then he's preaching, and then he turns around and he looks at me again. I'm like, man, I'm going to have to beat this guy up about something. You know? I think I sold him some bad dope or something. He just wants to get mad at me or something, you know, and do something. So on the third time, he turns around and he looks at me, and I remember him telling everybody, hold on. He says, forgive me, but I have to do this now. God has called me to do this now. And as he says these words, he turns around, he looks at me, and he says, you come here. And I remember walking up to this man. As I walked up to this man, these were the words that he said to me. He comes up to me and he says, you want to know if God is real? And he says, I have something to tell you. I don't know what it means, but you know what it means, and God knows what it means. He leans over and he whispers something in my ear. And when he whispered in my ear, I see my life go before my eyes. I'm telling you, every crime I had committed, I seen everything go right before my eyes. And I stood back and I said, bad high. Bad high. That weed must have had something, you know? Because, you know, we're always looking for, right? When God's doing miracles, we're always looking for excuses. Wow. And so I stand back, and that's what I thought to myself. And he said, the same people follow you for the devil, they're going to follow you for Jesus Christ. And I said, man, how does this man know? I was sharing with Pastor today. Anywhere I walk, the first time I walked into the church, I walked in with 4 guys right behind me. See, I was slinging dope back in the day. I thought I had it going on, so I had these guys everywhere. Anybody would start a fight with me before I could take one swing, I guarantee you 3-4 guys would knock that dude up. How would he know? He didn't know me. But God knew who I was, like God knows who you are. He said, the same way people follow you for the devil, they're going to follow you for Jesus. He says, you need to understand that God has something for you. You're going to be a powerful preacher one of these days. I said, man, God can't use me. I'm thinking to myself, how can God use someone like me? I don't even know how to read. I don't have no education. How can God use someone like me? But see, God used this man that was demon possessed. Because this man wanted to go with Jesus. But Jesus says, no, go into your city. If you came out of some hood around here, you need to go back to your hood and go preach the word of God. Come on. He says, go back into your city and tell them about me. Tell them what I do to you. It's our duty to go out and tell people about the love of Christ. I went into my neighborhood about 7 years ago, and I prayed at the hospital, even though there was a hit on my life. I went and prayed with about 150 of my homeboys and homegirls all at the same time. See, God uses what happened to you in the past to glorify his name. Hallelujah. As this man said these words to me, I walked back to where I was, and I stood against that wall. He continued to preach, and as he continued to preach, the first thing I said, is that all you got? I remember clearly telling God, is that all you got? I said, if you're the God that these people believe in, you will stop me from touching my wife. If you're the God that these people believe in, you will stop me from drinking and smoking, getting high. You will stop me from being hateful and bitter. You will stop me from being the pig who that I am. Because, you know, we got some bad demons in us. Some dirty demons in us. He said, you will make me the person to be. And if you do that in my life, not next week, not next month, but tonight, I will serve you for the rest of my life. And I'm going to tell you that those were the last words I said. And I felt God hit me in the back of my knees. And I fell on my knees and I started to cry out to God. I had no religious background. I had no relationship with God. I didn't even believe in him.